Dylan Carew, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. This is gonna be a fun one. For folks who don't know, you grew up in Iowa City, about an hour from where I grew up. We're like a couple years apart, so a lot of memories we have through high school are probably similar. I want to start though with you're out at the Big Game Wrestling Club, and we're gonna get into how you founded that and all of it. But I was talking to Brian Medlin, who was at the World Cup. He said they had their whole camp at your facility.
Yeah, we were pretty lucky. We basically ended up hosting the World Cup camp and having all the senior level athletes and coaches and everybody here, which provided to be a very unique experience. I don't know if it'll ever happen again. So it was pretty awesome to get to have all those guys here and get to spend a week, watching them train, being right in there with them and getting to host them. That was probably one of the highlights of opening this facility for sure.
Yeah, no, Medlin was just couldn't stop talking about the facilities, how he's like, we could do our cut there. Everything was right there. It was just amazing. And I got to get out to see it, man. I come out to Iowa City a fair amount. My mom lives in Macokota, so I'm out in Iowa a decent amount. So I got to get out there and see that thing.
Yeah, man, anytime. We gotta definitely have an open door policy, that's for sure.
Yeah, and it's cool because what's the name of the facility?
The Tom Lepic Wrestling Complex is the name of it. Tom was the guy that he's here in the Iowa City area, longtime wrestling leader. I wrestled at Iowa long time. He was the Hawkeye Wrestling Club president at one point, Iowa City West wrestling coach, and then just supporter of wrestling in general in the area. So when we needed to open the facility, we were probably about a year financially from, being able to have everything that I would have wanted, what I mean, with, the nicest everything. So I went and talked to Coach Lepic, and I've known him since I was a little kid, and we had a meeting, and I was pretty nervous going in there, asking for, an amount of money that, was pretty good, and for the naming rights of the facility and whatnot, and a partnership between us, to show the support from the community. And Coach Lepic jumped on board right away, stood up, gave me a hug, was like, "I love you, buddy. I got you." And
Wow.
races. And him and my dad, the support that we get from those guys, and then now the rest of the community, it's really the reason why we have this facility and why we have the ability to do things the way we do here.
And man, that's so cool because to go and ask for money is a tough thing. Did going into that meeting, do you think he knew you were getting ready to make an ask, or he had no idea?
I think so. You know what I mean? I think he probably had an idea because I kind of, precursored it with him. And it's not like the first time he supported anything that any of us boys have done. I mean, he was a real big part of helping West High Wrestling for a long time, and Mark Reiland. And so, I mean, he helped us go to Fargo. He funded teams, all kinds of things, all these years that he's helped with. I'd be a liar if I didn't say I was nervous. I mean, I told my dad going in the meeting, I'm like, I don't know what to expect, blah, 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 and I got out of there, and it was only like a 10, 15-minute meeting. I mean, it was,
Dude.
when you're around good people, things tend to go pretty easy, and that guy's world class. So, I mean, it was, honestly, a dream come true.
You must have been so jacked walking out of that meeting.
I was pretty stoked. Yeah.
And you mentioned those Iowa City West teams. I mean, I don't think people realize just how deep those teams were. How many Fargo champs?
I was trying to think about that this morning when I woke up because I figured that between our history that would come up. Everybody won at least one.
That's stupid, dude. That
Yeah.
is just crazy. Now, this is a name that I remember this guy being an absolute killer. Like I was intimidated from this guy, and I was like the same age as him. Was Justin Cothe an Iowa State guy, or is this a different school? I can't remember.
No, yeah. So Justin Cothe was a Iowa City West kid as well.
But this
He
is way
was
after.
he was a freshman when I was a senior.
Okay, because that
Yep.
dude was an assassin. I remember he
Yeah.
was just intimidating, bro.
He was tough,
Yeah.
tough kid, man.
So let's go back to the beginning for you. So were you an Ubasa kid, or where did you get your start?
Yep. So I started in Iowa City, obviously, in the kids clubs. I actually, back in the day, went to City High and West High's kids programs.
Nice.
And then I think I started with Pablo when I was either 6 or 7, out of Carver Hawkeye. That was kind of the start for Pablo. We were right there at the beginning. We were just little kids running around in there. And then Pablo was my only club coach my entire career. And then Mark Reiland stepped in my career real young when we knew we were going to go to West High at a young age. So those two guys and my dad were really, the coaches that I had then.
And how did it come to be that you guys were all going to go to West?
Basically, that's a wild thing because I think a lot of people probably, back in the day when I was in high school, everybody assumed everybody was recruited to go there, blah, 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 all this stuff, right? We'd have reporters ask us, did you guys get recruited to come here? And like Rylan would be shaking his head, laughing. And like, basically, the long story short is that us boys grew up in Pablo's club together. And back then, our dads always said that we were going to go to school together. And Mark Reiland, was deep into USA Wrestling and he did a lot. And it was easy to make that, transition to that we were all going to go to West High because of the guy that was coaching all the time. And, and we wanted to wrestle together. We're a unique group of kids. You see a lot of people talk about like, oh, these are my wrestling brothers, blah, blah, all that. Well, like those boys that I just named are still like, I talk to them every single day. Like, it's not
Right.
like we just went to club wrestling together. And then when we went to club wrestling together, we went to high school together, we wrestled in college together, we do business together. Like our lives are solid. I mean, truly, like those guys we all grew up more like brothers than we did friends,
Right.
and brothers and train like brothers and everything that goes with that, I guess.
Bro, the amount of time you guys just spent traveling and hanging out is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I think St. John's mom has some videos and photos and stuff from back in the day that instantly, when you said that, like traveling together, we have some pretty funny stuff from way back then. But yeah, I mean, I couldn't even possibly put together like the time of that. And like, we didn't just wrestle together, like we hunted together, like our dads and our families, everything. If we vacation, people vacation together, there was nothing that wasn't together.
Right. That's what makes it cool because even though you were coming together for this kind of like quote unquote what looked like from afar like a dream team, you guys have been together from the get go. So it was like a cohesivity that you guys all had. And you talk about, dude, Nate Moore. I mean, you mentioned earlier maybe just a couple high school losses. That dude was on fire in high school. I mean, he was one of the toughest, most formidable guys you could wrestle in high school.
Yeah, I think, honest to God, I don't think Nate Moore gets the respect
I don't
uh,
either.
what he deserves. In my opinion, I don't know if there's definitely not very many more dominant wrestlers than Nate in high school. And, outside of, a couple matches, that didn't go his way, I don't even think he had a close match. And he beat not only in the state of Iowa, but like, I mean, I could tell you some of the guys that he beat on the national scene. Like, I don't even know how many stop signs he has from high school, from Fargo and like Filas and stuff, but definitely five or more. I know that for
Wow.
sure. He was, I don't think I scored a takedown on Nate until maybe like my junior year of high school in
Dude,
my whole life.
I'll never forget when I was in eighth grade on Christmas break. City High used to have like a Friday night tournament and like Christmas break time, and we shot over there, not knowing anything about the Iowa City West. I'm gonna call it the mob. It was like mob mentality, man. We rolled in there with the Illinois stuff on, and I wrestled Nate Moore, and the dude just beat me like a drum. I mean, I couldn't even score a point. Never felt someone that strong, and like he didn't really have a lot of emotion, so you didn't know what you were gonna expect out there. And that dude was just so solid.
He was just stone cold. I mean, and literally like exactly solid. You couldn't get through him. You know what I mean? You couldn't shoot on him. You couldn't stop his shots when he attacked. He was real solid. And honestly, I mean, I credit a lot of the success that the other guys around him had to how good Nate was his whole life, and
Mm-hmm.
I talk about that in our wrestling club now, where like when you got a guy like that nobody can beat, it brings the level of the room up. And it wasn't, that was one of the things that for us boys, like we weren't necessarily jealous of each other ever. We pushed each other really hard. And if someone was winning something, it was just the expectation that the others should be winning that too. And if it wasn't that way, you were going to hear about it from each other. And, it wasn't there was never like that. That, like I said, that like what you see in some kids now, or like social media life almost, where like we were just like, no, like we're all gonna win, and like if you don't win, you know, we're gonna make sure that you do next time type deal.
And I think you're spot on with, you cannot put a value on having guys around your club or room that are winning and then everyone else just expects to win. Like cause I didn't realize this until I started coaching some really elite guys, and you go to a tournament with them and everyone else just thinks they're going to win too because they're around these studs. And it's like, it's not that easy, but over time, hanging out with guys with high expectation does raise the bar for everyone. And like, it just shows them it's possible. So he was kind of that guy during your era.
Yeah, he definitely kind of set the bar, I would say, in our friend group. And then, over the years, everybody else, elevated up. And we were all fortunate because of that. And then, everybody had their own individual strengths that we brought to the table as well. But that was definitely, kind of, I would say, the start when we were kids was, you were gunning to just be able to compete with Nate,
Right.
and he was definitely the toughest kid in Pablo's room when we were kids. I mean, there was no doubt about it.
What's he doing now?
He's the head coach at Iowa City West. So,
Oh, no shit.
yeah, full circle deal there is that, so we always joke around, like people, call it the West High Bad Boys. And like, so now, one of the, like you said, the mob mentality, like that's kind of like a real thing. Like we joke around, like people somewhere along the line. I mean, I could tell you the whole story of how we got the name, but it's kind of funny.
Let's hear it.
Maybe I might hold
Hold
that
back.
one
Okay.
back, but yeah,
Okay.
it was in college that someone made a joke about, called us the West High Bad Boys, and I was just like, man, that's gonna stick, and it did after that. And so we used to joke around and say Mark Reiland was, like the OG West High Bad Boy, the leader, and now Nate's the head coach there, and he runs a business here in the Iowa City area. He's doing real well.
What's he do for a business?
He owns All Spray Power Washing, so they do power washing, and then they stain decks and stuff, does snow removal, blue
Nice.
collar work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's so cool to see all these wrestlers that are like doing their own businesses and just like making it happen, out there.
Yeah.
It's way more than people think. I mean, very few go on to coaching at the college level, right? So,
Yeah.
And I had read, even with your facility, do you still have a day job, or is Big Game now your day job?
Me and my brother, we go to work every morning. So my dad started Carew Landscaping 35 years ago, and me and my brother run it for him now. So we go to work first thing in the morning, work all day, go to wrestling practice, and then go home at night. So we don't wrestling doesn't pay the bills for us. Carew Landscaping is really kind of what allows us to do our club the way that we do it. And it's fun because like when we hosted the World Cup camp, like I think a lot of those people don't understand that until they come here. They just hear about a big club or see a club doing well and whatnot. But then when guys come here and they see, all of our employees and the equipment going in and out every day, and then, if we have to leave to go work or whatnot, or we come in covered in mud, it gives a little bit more perspective of, how much work goes into this club.
I mean, it's an insane level, and every other academy out there, I just imagine they're full time. I mean, when I was in high school, the number one was overtime, and they had 4 adults making good money as coaches for this club, and so I know your club is just as big as any of those now, and so to do a full time job and run the wrestling club business is impressive. So for folks who know you now as the coach of Big Game, in high school, freshman state champ.
Yep.
That's one of the rarest things you can have happen. What did you feel your sophomore year, kind of carrying that bullseye in your back throughout the season?
My sophomore year was like probably one of the wildest years of my high school career. It kind of started what ended up being the end of my career, which is crazy too. So that's a real loaded question, but I always wanted to be a 4-timer, right? I was Mark Reiland's first freshman state champion, and I think West High's first freshman state champion. And so like I didn't really feel any pressure, but like my first tournaments of the year, like you remember Tyler Clark.
Oh yeah.
Like one of the first tournaments of the year, man, Tyler Clark moved to Iowa, and I have to wrestle Tyler Clark, who ended up being my college roommate, and he stood in my wedding, I stood in his, which is like, full circle stuff again. But he was ranked like number 3 in the country, 2 or 3 in the country, and I had to wrestle him right away, and I beat him in overtime. And like that's when I knew, like I was like, all right, like I wasn't just a freshman state champ. I was pretty darn good. You know what I mean? And McDonough was in that bracket. Brett Bombach was in that bracket. Tommy Maroka was in that bracket. Myself. There were some real heavy hitters. I mean, towards the end of the year, I think Bombach, me, uh, Tyler Clark, and McDonough were all ranked in the top like 12 in the country. And me and Tyler Clark wrestled first round.
I remember that too.
Yeah.
I remember watching that from afar because, or maybe just reading about it because I think it was the same time as Illinois. But Tyler Clark, you never met someone with more confidence and just more. He just refused. I'd never seen someone so confident. It was me, him, and Clayton Rush growing up, and he was just a killer. And he moved to Bettendorf, like you said. I think his junior or senior year, wrestled for Danny Knight.
Yep.
And so I always had heard this story that he won like a 1-pointer in the first round. I thought it was against McDonough. It was against you that year.
It was against me.
So I was a random draw.
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing. So I lost to McDonough at districts. So if you lose at districts, you can wrestle a 2 from a district would be blind draw to wrestle a 1 from another district. So I had knee surgery, my first one ever in my career, like in the middle of the season, like 2 weeks before districts. And so like my first tournament back was against McDonough. And, that was a tough match for me because I ended up getting tired and he ended up beating me. And then I wrestled Clark first round and I lost. And then I like wrestled right back and wrestled a kid named Tyler Grask, who ended up wrestling at Iowa State, who was a couple times state champ in Iowa. Like that was my very next match after I lost to Clark. And so then I maybe won one, lost to Bombach. And like, man, I ended up getting like 7th place. And I just thought, wow, like I went from first a year ago to 7th. Like I remember like just being so embarrassed. And like nowadays, like as a grown man and thinking about it, like, especially as a coach, I'm like, there ain't nothing to be embarrassed about placing at a state tournament, especially in the state of Iowa in a bracket like that. But it wasn't what I wanted. And at the time I was brokenhearted. But that summer, I always tell the kids here, I'm like, that happened and it was a bad thing. Well, that summer I made the Fargo finals in both styles, won OW, and won. So I was like, transition a few months later, things were all right, But
wow.
I think that high school bracket was one of the best that there's ever been in the state of Iowa. That was really, really tough bracket.
Who won between Clark and McDonough in the finals?
McDonough won on a full Nelson call in double overtime. I believe.
God, what?
Yeah, I believe that's what it was.
And now Clark is a coach for you guys now, right?
Yep.
Wow.
So Tyler and me, that's my boy. We've been friends for a real long time now.
He's the only guy I know who went from Iowa State to Iowa. Like,
Yep.
I don't know anyone else who's done that.
What's funny too is when he came, so me, him, and Daniel Dennis lived together. Those were my roommates. Yep. And I used to mess with Tyler Clark pretty good. He does not like clowns, and I used to mess with him and put clown stuff in his room and under his bed and stuff just to mess with him. But one day I came out of, and I don't know where he got it from, but he found a picture of him getting his hand raised and me crying or whatever after he beat me that year at state, my sophomore year, and he had it put up on our fridge in our house. And that's the best one. There's no winning, messing around after that.
It's funny because he when he transferred to Iowa, he beat Ramos in the wrestle off, I think multiple times. And then
a couple times.
And then Ramos did better at Midlands, and so Ramos started, I think, if I'm remembering it correctly. Wow. Man, that's so wild that he lived with you. I didn't realize it came full circle like that.
Yeah, it was funny, man, because we wrestled and like, we were kind of friends, but we were kind of frenemies, if you will. You know what I mean? Because you know how it is. Like you're casual guys, but you want to beat them. And he was a guy coming from Illinois, coming to Iowa, and I'm an Iowa boy my whole life. I'm like, and better than anybody the Iowa Illinois thing,
Oh, it's
right? Like
heated.
it's heated. Like that doesn't change, never will. And
Never.
so it's like this dude ain't coming to Iowa, and like, but then like I said, like I mean, I love that dude. He's really a good person. He's a great dad now. He's got an awesome job. He's one of the best, that's for sure.
Is he still at striker?
Yeah, yep. So
Yeah.
he comes to Iowa City and works at the hospitals here, so we get to see him have lunch and stuff. And then he's helping out a little bit with the club, so it's great. He's
Nice,
done
man.
well for himself.
He's the best. Tyler, if you're listening, you're the man. Big fan of Tyler Clark, and he knows that. So that's your sophomore year. He was a senior. So then your
Yep.
junior year, did you wrestle McDonough in the finals?
I lost to McDonough in the semis, I believe 7-6. It was
Okay.
I gave up scramble right out of the go, gave up 5 points. Um, Ended up being a real close match. I think I gave up maybe a couple penalty points. I don't remember the whole. I probably remember it one way, maybe it was different. I don't know. So,
So when
but
it
I
was in the
lost.
semis?
Yeah, lost that one. And then my senior year, obviously I won it again, and kind of took care of that year.
And we got to hit on the big team titles. So tell me how the team titles decided in Iowa. Is it tournament or duels?
Both. And so my first 2 years in high school, we won uh, duals and traditional state. And then my last 2 years, we got second in both to Waverly. So we traded them in high school. So that was kind of fun, and we had some wild rivalries with Waverly back in those days too.
Did you guys duel them outside of the state series or no?
Yeah, we did.
Was that a big dog duel me? That had to be
There was a
crazy.
crazy one that I'm trying to remember what it was. My junior year, um, we wrestled them twice. So my sophomore year, we wrestled them, and we beat them. And in my opinion, that was the best West High team ever, maybe one of the best teams in the state of Iowa history. And then the next year, we wrestled them, and I don't remember who won, to be honest, because of I wrestled Mark Ballwig, who ended up being one of my teammates. I moved up to wrestle him. So we
Wow.
bumped, and I moved up to wrestle him. And I remember, being a little bit, I was definitely anxious for that match because Mark, was a bad dude and he was ranked really high in the country. But Nick Moore had beat him the year before. Nick Moore was a giant killer as well. And Nick beat him as a freshman at state and then lost to him the next week at dual. That's Nick Moore's only high school loss ever either. So if you're talking about like some of the greatest in Iowa high school history, either like Nick Moore, I mean, one loss, Mark Ballwig.
He beat Ballwig as a freshman at state?
Freshman at state, yes.
Oh my God. The place must have been going crazy.
It was insane. And so,
Oof.
yeah, so that
I'm getting
was,
chills over here. I'm getting chills. I'm just
yeah.
like, because to your point, the Ballwig's also intimidating, bro. Very
Oh, dude, one
intimidating.
of the best wrestling families ever in the state of Iowa. Those boys and their dad was a very, very tough dude too. Good college wrestler himself, and they were intimidating kids. I mean, they were just rugged, hard kids to wrestle. And so I remember being like, pretty well anxious and nervous, ready to wrestle Mark. And I remember Nick Moore walking up to me and going, dude, he's like, I beat him. If I did, you can. And we had this crazy match where it was like maybe 0-0 going to the third period, and Mark picked down, and I was pretty good on top, and I had kind of, um, a little series between a Mark Perry and Nick Simmons type deal. And a lot of people hated me for it, and it was borderline, whatever. And I ended up scoring a bunch of back points in the third period and winning pretty handily. And both coaches, Rick Caldwell and Mark Reiland, were like in the middle of the mat. There was parents like going crazy. I mean, like it wasn't quite the Geneseo story, but it was pushing towards that way. Let's put it that way.
So what was it, like a Merkel type thing on him, or what'd you have?
Yeah, so like Perry does his suck back, and Simmons like will go over the top and kind of choke people. It was a combination of both. It could be It could be anything in between there, depending on how you wanted to use it, I guess. I teach it to my kids now, but just a little bit different, just so that I think I gave up 2 penalty points to McDonough with it. It turned out to be a big thing. Like my junior and senior year, I had to show every single referee before dual meets and at the state tournament my move, what I was doing. And I didn't think
Really?
that was fair back then. I remember telling Mark Reiland, like, you tell me another time that a kid has ever had to show officials what he's doing at the Iowa High School State Tournament. I'm like, I didn't think that was fair. And they told me that they were either going to call it illegal or potentially dangerous, depending on what the referee, felt. And I'm like, well, that doesn't seem normal.
And you gotta just imagine Iowa City West was so hated at this time because of the dream team you guys had that I'm sure that people were just looking to get you guys. I
I
mean,
mean, people were writing letters, like all kinds of stuff. I mean, people would write letters to the paper to try to get kids in trouble and like talk about this alleged recruiting and things like that. There was definitely, I mean, a cloud around Iowa City West that people loved to hate us, and if a
oh,
West Side kid
definitely.
got beat, you were gonna it was gonna the arena was gonna erupt. You know what I mean? And for us kids, like it was fun, man. I just think about it like I don't remember ever feeling that pressure, which is, was the best. I mean, maybe we were arrogant kids. I don't know. Probably, especially myself. I would think most people, would laugh at that comment. But
See, I always felt that. So we would go to the Keith Young in Cedar Falls. Did you guys go
yep.
to that?
No, we never did.
You never did. So we saw
That
you at
was
the
a tough
Geneseo.
tournament.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was. But so we went to that my junior and senior year. We were the only Illinois team there. And I remember, the Geneseo Bi-State was the tournament I went to as an elementary school kid all the way through high school. And, I always knew that Iowa City came. But, I'd never really experienced Waverly Shell Rock. And I thought they were like the ruffians. Like these guys had like mullets. They were like, I thought they were like the dudes who were like kind of cocky and arrogant. And they were bruisers, bro. And they had
Yeah.
like the black and yellow. And I'll never forget going to that Keith Young tournament. And one of my teammates, Adam Sheely, wrestled Baldwin in the finals. I wrestled
Yep.
Mike Milley in the finals. Dude, they were tough though.
I used to wrestle Mike Milley too. My
Yeah.
sophomore year, I wrestled Mike. He was in that bracket as well. That
Jesus.
sophomore that sophomore year bracket, he was in that one as well. He was just,
Wow.
yeah. But no, I'll tell you that the Waverly guys, I mean, and back then, dude, I mean, we like hated each other. Like, I mean, all the way. And the coaches didn't really get along. I mean, there was one pretty good story where now Eric Whitcomb is like one of my best friends, and Orton, who was one of my assistant coaches in high school, like those dudes were like nose to nose. And now, like Eric brings his kids down every once in a while to work out with us. A bunch of the Waverly kids work out in my club, and Orton coaches with me as his son's in the club, and I give both of them crap all the time. I'm like,
Wow.
remember, I always tell the other one, I'm like, remember when Orton was going to beat you up, Whitcomb? And I always tell Orton, remember when Whitcomb was going to beat you up? And like that's how it was. But then outside of that, like in the summer, we were friends with those guys, so like it was good heated rivalry, I guess. That was always put behind it, and that's one of the reasons why Iowa USA wrestling is pretty unique. Is that it's pretty heated all year, but then in the summer, typically everybody comes together, and that was that way then as well. And now like yesterday, Rick Caldwell came over and sat down at my table at lunch, and like we've all become such good friends, and him and Mark Reiland became really close over the years before Mark's death, and so it was pretty awesome. Waverly, Shell Rock, and Iowa City West were the best things for each other. I can tell you that, and all the kids that were involved.
So Caldwell was the coach at Waverly?
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that and you talk about Iowa USA wrestling. Now I'm gonna forgive the drumming you put on Team Illinois Greco this summer, and that hurt because that Greco we can always bank on Illinois putting up a couple junior and cadet national titles. Now, when you were going to national and cadet duels, did you go for Team Iowa on
Yep.
juniors and cadets or?
Yep. So I wrestled cadet duels a couple times. I'm trying to think, and junior duels once. I didn't get to wrestle in junior duels much because I tore my ACL twice. That kind of limited things. for me. That's where, like in my Fargo career, I wrestled freshman, sophomore year, and so I wrestled cadets. And then the only juniors I ever wrestled was I wrestled Greco once because my knee was hurt the other 2 years. So I went up there and Reiland convinced me to wrestle. He's like, you could still win Greco with one bad knee for sure. And I ended up losing to a kid named Cole Schmidt, who was a tough Greco kid back in the day too. So that was the only Greco match I lost in Fargo. Was
So
to him.
because I remember you winning Fila Cadets a couple times, and that
Yep.
was at the time maybe tougher than Fargo in some
Yeah,
situations.
it was. That's now what would be the cadet world teams, right? Or the equivalent. And those were a couple of the best tournaments I ever wrestled in my life were at the Fila tournaments. But I do think, it was equally as tough as Fargo, if not tougher, for sure.
Dude, how funny is it that back in the mid 2000s, the thought of the cadet world team was on no one's mind. No one even thought about it.
You won Fila Cadets, and you got offered to go on a tour. Like you could go overseas to whatever thing. Like, you know what I mean? It wasn't a thing. Like I remember that. Now I'm like, I've never been overseas for wrestling, so I'm like, man, that would have been cool. If that was a thing, I would have. Now I'm just trying to get kids to make teams so that we can go.
Yeah, no, seriously. But it is just no one. I don't know why people didn't think about it because I've looked at FILA or UWW and it's like they had those tournaments those years. I mean, for the juniors at least. I don't know about cadets, but yeah, it's funny how much it's changing. I know you're seeing that now with your club and kind of how you got to where you're at is amazing high school career. You go to University of Iowa, and as you've alluded to a couple times, you've had knee injuries your whole life. So
Yeah.
what was the situation where it was like your second year and you had double ACL surgery?
Yeah. So I'm trying to think. Coming into Iowa, I just had a ACL reconstruction, and then I wrestled my redshirt year that summer into University Nationals. I got hurt at University Nationals, um, and had surgery right after that. Came back in the fall and got hurt right before wrestle offs and Iowa City duels. I had torn my ACL on my right knee, and and that was for the second or third time, I can't remember. And then we wrestled Iowa City duels, and that Monday I was wrestling in the room and tore my other ACL in my left knee, and I ended up having double ACL, MCL, meniscus surgery, and that was pretty tough. I think the only other guy to ever have that is Spencer Lee. That's the only
Right.
that's the only two guys that I've ever heard of that have had that, at least at the University of Iowa. So like when Spencer had that surgery last year, like I sent him a message and was just like, hey dude, I know what you're about to go through. Probably not very many people do. I'm like, so good luck. And, that guy's obviously as elite as they come. So, and seemingly he's pulling out of it. So good for him. That's remarkable.
Because you were gonna wrestle with just the one
Yeah.
ACL tour. You're like, fuck it, I'm in the lineup. It's Iowa. I'm going for it. All my boys are in the lineup. Because like the year prior, all your guys did All American, right? St. John.
Yep. And that was the thing. It was like, all right. I mean, like I had to watch last year, from being hurt and like we're gonna do it again. I'm not waiting. And I remember Tom Brand saying to me, I had gotten an MRI, and he was like, it's not good. He's like, it's not good. And I'm like, I don't care. And he was like, well, how, you want to be a Hawkeye? And I'm like, yeah. Like that was basically like the extent of the conversation after the first one, right? Is like, I can do this. And so I've wrestled hurt with a bad knee for, like I said, already since sophomore year in high school. I'm like, I can do this. And we had a great trainer at the time in Matt Doyle, and I really believed in that. And then I tore the other one. And it was just like, all right. And then everybody, I remember we had this little meeting, me, Doyle, and Tom Brands, and they were just like, yeah, this is not, you can't do this. This is crazy, and I was like, yeah. I mean, I kind of agreed at the time. And then, I guess all these years later, to see if, Spencer did do it, that's insane. Because I know what it was like. I know what it felt like, to not have two knees.
And I'm so glad you mentioned that because you were in high school, multiple time national champ, as elite as they come. And just for you to go through that and then kind of compare what Spencer did with his situation, like how do you rate like how difficult that must have been to wrestle with no ACLs?
I mean, I can't even begin to wrap my head around how tough that kid must be. And I think that there's unique humans, and I think that there's unique circumstances where people can really, get through things. And a lot of it comes down to, I've tried to think about that for him. It's insane. I guess you got to get on top. Don't give up the first takedown. Don't get underneath someone, and you probably got the best chance. But anybody that's ever had a torn ACL can start to think about how hard that must be to compete at that level. And to see a guy do that is just, it's really insane.
When you have a torn ACL, is it that you have constant pain, or only when you put it in certain situations, then you get like a spike of pain?
Like the right away, it feels like you break your leg, and that's like the immediate reaction is that's how bad it hurts, and when it snaps, and then it hurts for a few days, like where it'll be like real pain, and then it's just unstable, and that's really what I experienced more than anything was the unstableness. And I scrambled a lot and whatnot. So like when I think about like Spencer, is maybe he wrestles a little bit more tight, a little bit more solid, and was in control of a lot more. Where my style, I probably couldn't have done that because guys were hitting my legs. I scrambled, I rolled, I kicked legs in on top. I think stylistically would be the difference between being able to compete hurt like that and not. And my style didn't probably allow for that. I probably should have sprawled a little bit more, and not tried to cut so many corners, but whatever. And so that's the thing is like every little time it gets tweaked or whatever, because eventually your hamstring will take over somewhat for your ACL, or at least in the right rehab situations. Uh, but it's extremely difficult. And I think so. A year ago, I had ACL number 6. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. And
Why? Just for your just so you could practice and coach, or what?
yeah, so I ended up having my body got real beat up about a couple years ago here again. And I had neck surgery, followed by elbow surgery, followed by another knee surgery, followed by a shoulder surgery. Those were all last year. I had
Do you have
4.
like a crash, or what happened?
No, I wrestling. Really, what happened was wrestling Wyatt Volker and Ben Keeter every night for like a year. My neck that was already hurt got real bad, and those two, I credit to them that they kind of finished it off. And Tate Nactaborn didn't help that either. But those kids, and all of a sudden my neck was so bad. I'm like, I didn't know if it was my neck or my shoulder that was the issue. So I went in and it started getting real, real bad. And to the point where I couldn't work. I lost feeling in my arm, all kinds of stuff. So I ended up going and seeing a neuro specialist at the University of Iowa, and he told me that I need neck surgery. And I tried to wait, and then I was down at our farm, and I stepped off a trailer, and it was like God himself hit me in the back of the head with a bat. And from that point forward, basically, if I didn't have my wife taking care of me, I was pretty rough, man, for a while. And so I went in and got an MRI on my neck and my shoulder, and they were like, yeah, you got to do this. And so then I was like, well, my elbows hurt too, so maybe I'll just do that. I needed Tommy John in my elbow, and so I was like, maybe I'll get that done. And then just a freak deal. I was up in the wrestling room with my brother. We were showing some technique after Fargo, and my brother like picked me up in a bear hug and just set me down, like just like when you see one of your boys run up, grab him, pick him up, and let go like that. And my feet hit the mat, and my knee wasn't there, and I knew instantly what happened. Derek St. John and Allie Reagan were sitting on the wall, and I like went crawling over to them, and I was like, oh my God, I was like, I just tore my ACL. And Derek was like, again, that's my childhood boy. So he just immediately starts talking shit to me. And it's like, stop it. You're such a pussy. Like, stand up, that kind of thing. I'm like, no, dude, I know exactly what this feels like. So then I had to like schedule again with my orthopedic surgeon. I called him and I like went in there and I'm like, hey, Dr. Wolf, I'm like, I'm 100% sure that I tore my ACL. And he's like, well, you would know, I guess. He's like, so if you believe it, he's like, we'll do an MRI. And so then he did, and sure enough, it was destroyed. And so I had a crazy knee surgery that last year. I'm still recovering from it right now. And it's
Bro, let's hope Carew Landscaping has health insurance.
yeah, no doubt. That's where the guys here, they all laugh. They're like, you haven't worked in a year, like, probably.
Bro, that is so. A couple of things I got to go back to. So, who you said it was Ben Cooter, and what's the
Yep.
other guy's name?
Wyatt Volker.
All right, so I don't know anything about high school wrestling these days. I know a little bit, but really not as much as coaches who are in it like you. So Volker, is he wrestling Jacob Warner today?
This morning, I'll be in his corner.
So where's he at these days? Iowa State?
UNI.
UNI, okay.
Yep.
Schwab mob, respect.
Yep.
And now I can't go literally an hour on Twitter without seeing this Ben Cooter. Is he just like a football star, wrestling star? Like what's his deal?
Oh man, he's literally everything. He's an amazing athlete. So my brother-in-law is TJ Seabolt. So he's really a Seabolt kid.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Your brother-in-law is TJ?
Yeah.
So, are you also related to the Vance Light family?
No, but
okay.
I know all the Lights.
I thought you were related to them. That's crazy. You're related to Seabolt. Okay, so sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
So Ben would train with us a little bit when he couldn't make it over to Seabolt and whatnot, and kind of as his career is like expanded, like in all sports, like the kid, needs places to train. So he trained here, a little bit and whatnot when we could help him out. And it's like that's when and Wyatt needed a bigger guy to wrestle because he just had him and Tate and a few other guys, and Mickey Griffith was in here and a couple other kids who Mickey's at Iowa now. He's wrestling this morning as well. But I was just wrestling these bigger kids, and it just kept getting hurt, and I don't know. And like, that's what Ben, I saw him, came to World Cup camp 2 weeks ago and he was messing around. He grabbed me and I was like, dude, I ain't got it for you no more. I mean, if you haven't seen that kid in person, he's like 6'3", 6'4", 230 pounds. Like he can run like the wind. He's a great baseball player, a great track kid. Obviously a 4-star recruit in football and the number 1 pound for pound kid in the country now in wrestling.
Number 1 pound for pound.
Yeah.
Holy shit. I didn't realize he was that legit. Man, that's amazing. Is he going to wrestle or play
world champ last year?
Jesus, bro.
Yeah.
I need to get an animal. I need to get the memo. That's insane. So is he going to wrestle or play football?
I don't know. He's signed to do both at Iowa.
I don't like that. That's a little scary, but
we'll see what happens for him. I just hope if he does both, I hope he gets a huge NIL deal and the kid gets what he deserves. Because if you're like that and you're going to play both sports, in this day and age, that kid deserves to get paid.
100%. Absolutely. Yeah. Wow. That's amazing that he's that solid. And so that's how you got all these injuries. So basically you're at your farm, you step off a trailer and like a nerve got pinched and you just couldn't move. It leveled you or what?
Yeah. My sister and my dad were standing next to me and I was like literally trying to get back to my feet. I don't know. It was so weird. And so I'd seen the specialist at the university before that. And he told me, he's like, at some point, this is going to become unbearable for you. And he's like, it'll be like someone flipped a light switch because they were already telling me you have nerves pinched down, you have bulged and herniated discs in your neck. He's like, you look like a wrestler that's wrestled his whole life. It's destroyed. And so like, I remember when we were coming home, I'm like texting my wife and I was like almost in tears telling my dad, I'm like, I can't explain to you how bad this hurts. I'm like, I'm going to the hospital tomorrow. I'm like, going to get this scheduled. Well, me and my wife had engagement photos. And so she's tougher than I am, being a Seabolt, it's in her. And so she's like, you're not getting surgery before our engagement photos because they're going to cut my throat wide open. So I had to wait like a few weeks and to get the surgery. And like, even like in the waiting room, like I'm like having my wife, like she's like stretching my arm and stuff. Like it was so uncomfortable. I didn't sleep for a long time. It was crazy. I would like all the surgeries I've ever had, I would take them all over having that neck pain again.
And one of the worst things that could happen to a person is sleep deprivation. So if you're not sleeping, everything else is just amplified.
Yeah. That made things real rough.
So
But
your
then I had
wife is,
4 surgeries in a row and didn't sleep for like, 6 months anyways after
dude,
that. So,
you're a machine, man. So your wife is TJ's sister, though?
yep.
So you know she's seen some toughness in her day. I mean,
Oh yeah.
oh my God.
Yep.
And it's funny because, when you think about the two clubs in Iowa, in our day it was Ubasa, and now it's definitely Seabolt, and then Big Game. All I hear about is you two. And so it's crazy that I had no idea you were related. So do you
Yeah.
guys ever do like any joint clubs, or is it pretty separate?
No, we keep things pretty separate. He does his thing, I do my thing, and we compete hard against each other. But like, we work together. Like there was a tournament here in Corville, not long ago where the two of us were just like, hey, like there's not a lot of kids signed up for this. Why don't we just take all of our kids and we're going to get a bunch of good matches against each other? It was actually the day of the Iowa State duel. So we were like, we can go do this and we can go to the Iowa State duel right after this. So
Wow.
we did that, and obviously me and TJ talk about wrestling a lot together. So it's but like I said, we both do our own thing and we both compete hard.
For sure. And what I've read about your club is that you take a holistic approach. Not to say Seabolt doesn't, but it just seems like you guys really emphasize that. And I've heard interviews you've done with Flo and other people, and it's like you guys are doing not just the on the mat stuff. Like what else are you guys doing?
So we do the wrestling obviously, but then again, like, I want the kids to understand, like, if you ask a lot out of these kids, you have to be able to show them that you care about them. So we do a lot of stuff outside of it, mainly hunting. So we have like basically a hunting division of what we do, where we take kids and veterans hunting through an organization called Giving Back Outdoors that I work with as well. And so, we spend a lot of time in the woods and fishing and, different trips with our kids that way. We provide a lot of different experiences for the kids too, of, buying them tickets to like World Cup and things like that. I just am a firm believer in like anywhere where my dad and like the kids that I grew up with, our parents, like we went somewhere, like we stayed a couple days after that, like, and our parents made sure that we knew that wrestling was one thing, but like there was more to it. And so like that's what I want these kids to understand. And especially like I said, I mean, if you're gonna stand in a wrestling room and yell and expect a lot out of a kid, like, you have to have that relationship with them. You don't just because you're the coach doesn't give you the right to, to chew a kid's ass and make him, do something. Like, no, you have to respect that kid the same, and show them that you respect them, because they're an individual as well. And that's where I think when you build that coach to athlete relationship that way, you're by the time they're in high school, those kids will freaking run through a wall for you, and that's kind of my experience with the kids that I've coached so far is like, they're my athletes, but some of them are my best friends. I mean, Jarrett Dagan, that kid, when I started coaching him, I was like 21 years old, and he's only a few years younger than me. Like he's literally like one of my best friends in the whole world, and that's a kid I coached. And some of these old, boys that just graduated last year, I think we graduated like 13 seniors. But those kids, like, I mean, I couldn't even measure the amount of time that we've spent together. You share your lives together, and that's why when you share your lives together, you have to do it outside of a wrestling room as well. You get to look into each other's, everything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're wise beyond your years, because that is every coach that's come on here and has like had a lot of success. They always talk about that. And I'm thinking specifically about one of my mentors, Mike Powell. His coaching philosophy is trust, love, and truth. And like once
Yeah.
they trust you, you show them the love. Actually, it's you show them the love, then they trust you, then you can be real with them. But you can't
Yeah.
be direct with them until you've shown them over time that you're trustworthy. So wow,
Yeah.
it's cool that you're taking that approach, man, because we've all seen the worst of the sport when it's just hard ass coach, busting ass, kids are feeling bad about themselves. And there's a lot of that. I think it's really changed over the past 10 to 15 years for the better. Um, so I got to hit you with two quick questions, man. I know you're coaching today. Tell me about so after your double surgery in
Yep.
Iowa, you're in a wheelchair. Was there like an emotional down period for you when you kind of set in that? Like, tell me about that.
Man, I that, yeah, it was bad. real bad. For that, I remember, Tom Brands having me sit in a wheelchair for the Iowa State meet, and something that I had looked forward to my whole life, and sitting there for that, and then every time I would get healthy, it'd be bam again, all the way through the end. And I think that that's something that a lot of people don't talk about in wrestling, is it's like you do become depressed. I mean, it's tough. It's hard to be hurt, and it's hard to be hurt for that long. And those wounds were open for a long time with me. And the people closest to me know that not always maybe did I handle the emotions the best, and I ended up moving to Montana, probably because of it when I was done with wrestling, and it's ultimately what led me to start the club. And it took a long time, but I think the club and my family, the people around me helped me close those doors, to the point where, I don't look back now, definitely at all. And I honestly, I wouldn't trade wrestling on those mats for what I have now with the kids I get to coach. And I wouldn't be the person I am, and definitely not the coach that I am, for those reasons. So it was tough, but I mean, and for a long time, not just like the months after that surgery, it was years and years after that.
Well, I'm glad you talk about it, because a lot of people, even if you had a successful college career and you wrestled all 4 or 5 years, even when you're done with that, and let's say you don't become a college coach, there's a depression for everyone, because your whole purpose in life has changed. Like before, it was all about the next season, the next season, the next season, and now it's gone. And it's a big void. Professional athletes feel it later. Wrestlers feel it right away because we're done.
Yeah, I really, I talk in smaller circles, maybe about, you see a lot of athletes, they lose their identity, and it's sad. It's sad that like someone would put that much care into something that's the only thing they care about. And you see guys that their professional lives fall off because of it, or that they sit there and tell you about how good they were 20 years ago and whatnot. And like, I mean, there's guys you bump into and you're just like, man, I don't even want to talk to that guy because of it or whatever, like you can't live in the past. Like, and, I always tell people, like, I coach with Jesse Whitmer, who's literally a legend. I mean, like that's a guy you should get on your thing too and have
I will. I definitely
tell
will.
his story. I mean, that guy's, but you would never hear Jesse talk about winning an NCAA title and being one of the, most famous Iowa wrestlers of all time. Because that was a goal, but, things were different after that. He had professional goals and things like that. And that's where, again, like where we coach and why it's so unique for us to have our business right here. Our kids, most of these kids that come through the club, at some point, they lay sod for Carew landscaping, and they get to feel what it's like to dig, with a shovel and to get their ass chewed, on a job site. And it starts at the top with my dad, who dropped out of college and started a landscaping business with a lawnmower and a pickup, and is, pretty well built an empire. And these kids get to see that. So they know firsthand, and we talk about it every night, that there's life after wrestling. And it's cool to be an NCAA champ. It's cool if you wanted to be a world champ and everything like that. But guess what? Like, even for those guys, it's over at some point. And you have to then be able to have a life, that is successful after that. And lots of wrestlers are successful because of that. But, there's individuals that fall through the cracks, or, it's kind of tough to see.
I see it about I say 2 out of every 10 interviews I do, I walk away a little depressed, because I'm like, wow, that person just did not move on. Like that, their best years were when they were 19 years old. And it's like, oof, it hurts your heart a little bit. And it just kind of makes you like rethink things. And you're like, we need to talk more about life after wrestling. And there was a guy on my podcast, Connor Beebe, who was a legend at Montini in Chicago.
I either wrestled him or his brother. I can't.
His brother was our age. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Carson.
Yep.
Yeah. Carson. But his older brother went to Central Michigan, and he said when he was done with college, he didn't know what to do. Like he was totally lost. Like didn't know. And that's I'm not singling him out. That's a lot of people who've been on the show said that,
Well, I'll be honest with you. I mean, that's why I moved to Montana and, was trying to figure out who I was again, and like I said, I'm just extremely lucky because of, my wife who's been with me for all these years. She went through, the darkest times with me of that stuff. And then to have my dad and my brothers, who my dad's had up and downs in his life as well professionally. And, he always is just like, dude, it's just another wrestling match. Like, get back on top. Like, you know what I mean? Go get another takedown or stand up and do something about it. And so, like, that again, like, that's where we coach kids in wrestling, but, you got to help them in life too. And that's where, I'm so proud of our kids here that, it'd be easy for all of our kids just to go to one of the 3 state schools and, because they're from Iowa and whatnot. Well, I got kids wrestling literally across the country now at different schools. And some of them made tough decisions. I mean, Hunter Garver made a life decision based off of life after wrestling to go to Stanford. And to me, like,
smart move, Hunter. Smart move.
Exactly. Like, I mean, like I said, I mean, there's a lot of people that are going to have success in athletics. There's very few that are going to have a degree that means something when they're done. And, that's success to me. That's what, I believe that kid heard the message. When kids make decisions like that, they hear the message. You know what I mean? Wyatt Volker, choosing you and I because of who the coaches are and what he believes in, and that, a greater good. He heard the message, and, there's other examples, like Mickey Griffith, who ended up at Iowa. You want to be a lifelong Hawkeye and you want to chase your dreams. You heard the message because what it means to you to do that as well. So, that's the whole thing is if these kids hear the message to chase their own dreams and to be successful when they're done, then we've succeeded, because everybody's going to win and everybody's going to lose between there and on a wrestling mat, right?
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you guys are pushing that message in, just to fast forward, you go to Montana, you start the club out there, you coach is it Jarrett Duggan? That's how you pronounce
Deegan.
it? Deegan, excuse me. Yep. He goes to Iowa State, and then so eventually you move back to Iowa, and you have this I'm calling it an academy, a mega club. You have 2 locations, Big Game Wrestling. So if you're in the Quad Cities, they have one in Bettendorf, and they're out of Craig Wagner's place over at Agogi. Well, it used to be Agogi, now it's merged. So Iowa City, Bettendorf. Let me ask you this though, before totally off topic. We got to hit on this. How long do you got? I just want to talk about this.
I got time. I'm good.
Okay, real quick. All right. So for folks who don't know, when we were in high school, Iowa City West came to a tournament that my high school hosted in tiny Geneseo, Illinois, and it brought the best Chicago teams, kind of like the Dan Gable Donnybrook, kind of like that. And there was this team, St. Rita, one of the best teams. They had John Starzyk, who most people probably never heard of John Starzyk unless you're from Illinois. Unbelievable kids wrestler, 3-time high school state champ, and him and Nate Moore squared off. What do you remember from this whole exchange?
Oh man, I remember I think it was 1 and 2 in the country. If not, it was like 2 and 3. Yeah, I think it was 1 and 2 in the country. And we would go to Dvorak, we would go to Geneseo, and like I said before, Illinois and Iowa don't like each other when it comes to prep sports, or at least wrestling. It's very heated. And so I think there was some bad blood leading up to it, because I think we won Dvorak a couple times and we won Geneseo maybe. And my freshman year, I think, St. Rita was good. Providence Catholic was good. Like, those teams were legit. And we got our asses whipped by them a couple times, in tournament settings and whatnot. Well, our best kid in the state of Iowa is Nate Moore. And at the time, John Starzyk was probably the best kid in Illinois. And I mean, they're on a collision course for this, gladiator moment. And it's in that gym, which isn't like huge or anything. And all the focus is on this match. And, the way I remember it is that Nate gets hit with a cutback cradle, and John scores 5 points. It ends up being a good match or whatever, but he wins. And what happened next was just complete chaos. I remember hearing some screaming and yelling, And I looked up in the stands and I saw Starzik's old man and his uncle in the West High section where all of our parents were. And I know those guys that I grew up with. And they are, most of them are from Dubuque, Iowa, and don't take nothing from nobody. And then you throw in the St. John's from Belle Plaine and whatnot. You got a lot of rednecks in one little area. And next thing you know, there was punches being thrown and people getting thrown off a balcony. I mean, literally, remember that rail? I mean,
I'll
dude, I
never
remember
forget it, bro.
watching the
Yeah.
one dude go ass over apple carts over the rail. I mean, it looked like the crowd just caved in on itself because so many people were fighting. Then there was police there. They stopped the tournament. Remember, like
Oh yeah.
matches got stopped. It was crazy.
So this tournament started on Friday, and it was like the finals were at like 3 on Saturday, and like the semis were done at like 11 a.m. Saturday. So from 11 to 3, everyone's uptown getting tuned up, and the St. Rita guys, they're not the North Siders that are super wealthy. The South Suburban guys are gritty, kind of like just tough, nasty dudes, like very
Yeah.
tough, and probably the equivalent of a redneck for like city people, like
Yeah.
just gritty. They'll fight anyone. They have really thick accents. And so, yeah, that's the scene. And they're heavy drinkers. And I'm sure the Iowa City West parents like a beer or two. And
Yeah.
so this is the scene, and everyone's kind of tuned up. And there was like a real hatred for Iowa and high school wrestling at the time.
Yeah.
Like it was evident. And I forgot you guys went to Dvorak now that you say that.
Yeah. That scene was probably one of the most memorable things I've ever seen in a wrestling setting in my life. And I don't even think it was that bad. That's how crazy I am. I'm like, that was awesome. Like, right?
Oh.
Like that was cool. Nowadays people would literally go to jail. There'd be lawsuits. Kids would, be in trouble for if they were there taking videos, all kinds of stuff. It would be completely different. Like they would be all over Twitter, ESPN, all that stuff. And then there's guys like us that just remember it because we were there and we get to laugh about it. It was epic.
And like you said, 15 minutes later, the show went on and nothing happened. No one got arrested. Like you said, now the videos, the teachers, that just bums me out, because that was the best part about it, is that after all this happens, people are even more testosteroned up and the matches go on, right? And then there's more just great finals. So it's like, man, there's not many people who remember it that clearly like you do. And like, I'm so glad, because the following year they wrestled again and Nate Moore got the win. And so they went 1-1, but like, bro, it was just so intense.
It was crazy. And what was, now that I'm thinking about it too, like when you think about those guys wrestling, think about how short and stocky Nate Moore was and how long and lanky John Starship was.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was like a stylistic matchup that was crazy too. And like the first match, John won probably because of that, right? Because of his advantages. And the second match, Nate won because of his, style and, advantages with his body. And it's crazy. And then they, I think Starship kind of going to Oklahoma.
He went to OU. Yeah. And he
transferred after that somewhere. I can't remember. I think he ended up having a decent, smaller college career, maybe. Am I right? I don't know.
I don't remember a lot about and this is like right after I graduated, I kind of got out of it for a while. But I remember like just like a lot of kids, and I don't want to speak for John Starzik, and I actually don't know him, but I just think a lot of kids back then, the parents, and a lot of our parents, not mine, but a lot of them over prioritized winning. And so like they would let these kids like get away with shit on the road. Like some of the stuff you saw as like what you'd hear about these kids would do on the road. Like, so yeah, what I'm saying is that I don't know if all of his life was in order, and that's maybe why OU didn't work out, but straight wrestling, deadly, bro. Deadly.
He was wicked.
When I was at Dvorak as a freshman, you remember Pat McCaffrey?
Oh yeah. Yeah, he lived with Seabolts.
I know, bro.
My wife just raised her hand from the other.
Oh, is she in there?
She lived with him. So,
bro, Pat McCaffrey transferred to Montini. This was the last year we went to Dvorak. I was a freshman. Starzik makes the finals, kills everybody. Pat McCaffrey makes the finals. No one knows who Pat McCaffrey is. He tech fold Starzik in the finals.
Yeah,
bro, it was like, what the fuck is this kid? Like,
Dvorak was insane. Tough.
Absolutely.
I mean, that tournament was crazy because I wrestled in it 3 times. And like I remember like the first year, like Albert White was maybe a senior. And like I remember watching him and I was just like, whoa, this dude is legit. And then like I wrestled Spangler in the finals my first year.
Chris
And
or
then,
Brian?
Chris at
How'd that go?
119 pounds. I beat him. And the next year he was at 171 and wrestled Gambrel. Yeah,
Yes.
that was crazy. Um, yeah.
How
I
many times did you win Dvorak?
3.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's his, I'm telling you, like for to come into an Illinois tournament, win it 3 times, that had to feel good. And you guys said that the
Yeah.
team won a couple times?
Yeah, I think I can't remember that. I think we won it twice when I was in high school, but I might be mistaken on that. But I mean, that was a tough tournament because we went to the Minnesota Christmas tournament, the Clash, Dvorak, and Geneseo. Like,
Wow.
yeah,
You went to
like
the Minnesota Christmas tournament.
yeah, we were chasing it down back then because Reiland wanted us to be public school national champs, and so we had to wrestle everybody if we could, I mean, try to get as many good matches as we could.
Isn't it crazy how much high school wrestling's changed from 2007, 2008 to now? Like those were like the national tournaments back then. Like I didn't hear about anyone going to Ironman. I don't remember anyone talking about any of like the beasts of the. I know it was going on, but maybe just because the internet was just kind of like flow was taken off that we didn't hear about it. But I don't remember hearing about any of that shit.
No, me neither. And like I remember, like Chris Villonga turned out to be like one of my good friends, and like he was a Jersey kid, wrestled at Blair. Like the only times I ever heard about that stuff was when Orlando, his dad would call my dad, and then my dad would be like, "Oh yeah, well Chris wrestled here this week," and I'm like, "I don't even know what that is." Right. I mean, like Super 32, what? That wasn't a. I mean, maybe we were just Midwest kids, with our heads in the sand. I don't know, but whatever.
I think that's what it was, man.
Yeah.
It's
because Fargo was like it for us, like, and that's kind of like how our, my high school and like the boys I grew up with, it was like state titles cool or whatever, but like that's just a stepping stone. Like that doesn't even count. Like if you win high school state, great. What counts is if you win Fila Cadets or if you win Fila Juniors or Fargo. Like that's the only way you're going to be a certified badass in our world, right? Is if you win those. That's it. The rest of it doesn't matter.
That's just a meat locker, man. You guys that's the level that was expected, and it showed, man. You guys put together some of the best teams that in Iowa history, and it was fun to watch it from afar, and it's awesome to see what you guys are all doing now, man. And I'm glad to finally have you on the podcast. It's been a long time coming, and bro, next time I'm out there, I'm coming through. Yeah, I want to
absolutely.
Bro, I'm one of those people that have never shot a gun in my life. So you're gonna take me. I need help, man. I need the extracurriculars that your kids are doing.
Yeah, I'll take you. You'll come in here and you'll see all the dead animals and stuff. We got a bunch of mounts and whatnot. But they'll trip you up when you come in here. People love to see it, and we'll go out and shoot some guns or something. Maybe if it works out, take you hunting.
That'd be great, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Good luck to your guys today. And it's been fun, brother.
All right, buddy. I appreciate it. Look forward to it next time.
Take care.
All right. See ya.